I mean, I've read books about trauma. I have never read a book told from the inside by someone who knows. And when this has happened to you, you know when someone has been through it. You can't imagine what it's like. You feel it on a visceral level. And so when I put that into the story and I realized I loved this girl. I'd had so hard of a time loving myself when I was 15, 16. I was so awkward. I felt ugly. I felt stupid. I'm sure there are people out there that can really relate to this. And so when I wrote this story and I find myself crying for this fictional character, for what she's going through, and I realize, wait a minute, the heart of her story is my heart. What she went through, I went through. And I realized I was crying finally for myself and finding that compassion.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 444 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Andrea Torrey Balsara. Andrea is an award-winning children's and young adult author-illustrator, as well as an energy medicine practitioner and mental wellness and creativity coach. Her passion is to inspire joy through storytelling and energy healing, helping people of all ages to walk the hero's journey in real life. She writes and illustrates for young children under her full name, Andrea Torrey Balsara, and for young adults under A.T. Balsara. And we had an absolutely amazing conversation. It was a couple months ago, and I still remember how it lifted me up. And re-listening to and editing this episode was a pure, powerful experience for me. And that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by something that I think would be fitting for the message in this episode. Love, joy, laughter, smiles. It's sponsored by my new book, I Think It's a Sign That the Pun Also Rises. Dad jokes, puns, quips, laughs, groaners, and playful ponderings. Are you ready to groan, grin, and giggle? Rediscover the joy of wordplay with this collection of puns, dad jokes, and clever one-liners that promise to lift spirits and inspire smiles, one groan-worthy punchline at a time. Born from a simple mission of collecting and sharing dad jokes to brighten his neighborhood during tough times, this book gathers well over 1,000 of Mark Leslie's beloved daily chalkboard jokes into a single joy-packed volume. It's a treasure trove for anyone who loves language, humor, or just a good laugh. Inside, readers will find everything from meta jokes that play with the very idea of humor to rapid-fire dad jokes, music-themed zingers, and even a cheeky adults-only section. Each chapter is crafted to appeal to pun enthusiasts, casual joke collectors, and anyone in need of a smile. This book makes the perfect gift for that incorrigible mirth spreader in your life and includes hilarious funnies perfect for sharing with friends, family, or even strangers who could use a laugh. I Think It's a Sign That the Pun Also Rises is more than just a joke book. It's a celebration of connection, resilience, and the simple magic of a well-timed pun. Open to any page, share a joke, and make your world a little lighter. one groan at a time. Yeah, I know it was a bit self-indulgent to do an ad read for that book, but when I finished listening to the interview with Andrea, I was just thinking about what are those small things. Okay, this is foreshadowing, because I should be doing this in reflection, but what are some of those small things that don't really take much that you can do to make the world a better place for other people? And this immediately came to mind, this book, so that's why I did that. Because the way I do this podcast, as a little insiders, is I first start with re-listening to the episode, I edit it together, I pick the highlight clip that's going to go at the front, and in this particular case, I think I did 3 highlight clips before I settled on the one I did, and then I had to reject, well, there's 6 or 7 more really amazing things Andrea said. I often do that. I was like, I wish I could have all of them there. But that's why I use Opus Clips to sometimes generate those little teaser videos that I'll share on social media just to say, hey, this is a really cool guest and you should check it out. But that's an aside, a little bit of the way this sausage is made is that's how I put it together. I listen to the audio of the interview, I edit it together, and then I go back and piece all these pieces like this one here. And then after I finish recording this, of course, I'll stitch in the bumper, and then I'll go, and I've made some notes while I was, making show notes for the conversation, make some notes on what I wanted to reflect on. And so that's kind of how I put that together. And that's why it was just front of mind to talk about the little things and how this book represents something that was really important to me, which is making people smile, and still brings me such joy and pleasure. But I am going to forego comments from recent episodes just to leave a very brief personal update right here, not even with a bumper. I'm just going to go going right into the next segment relatively soon. But I am in the deep, dark throes of, and there is a pun intended there, of my book, Ghost Stories of the Great Lakes, which is due with my publisher on December 1st. And I'm recording this in the afternoon, in sort of late afternoon on Friday, the 21st. This episode was supposed to have already been out the door, at 12:01 a.m., which is pretty typical or normal. At least I have them, out before 9 a.m. on Fridays if I haven't made it. But it's just been tough. I was explaining this to my friend Julie, I've been doing writing sprints with very regularly. It's just been good for both of us in the mornings for about an hour. A book like this, I love it. I love the process of writing, but it's when I write a book, it's so all-consuming for me. I really need, it's like a method actor. I need to be in it. And I'm so in this book. And I know if I tried to do this for an extended period of time, I had a year to write this book from when I signed the contract. And yes, I did a lot of research throughout the year, and I collected things and put them together, and I bought books and found articles and bookmarked things and stitched pieces and notes together all over the place. And now I'm in the process of rereading some of the stuff that I found and then recrafting it. Kind of like I've got my kitchen with all of the pieces in the recipe, all the things I need. Some of them are pre-sliced up, and other ones I have to prepare to get ready, and then I blend it all together, and that's where the storytelling magic happens, as I kind of reconsume the pieces and then kind of regurgitate some of the stories in my own words and stitch them together, but then very carefully make sure I acknowledge the sources, because there's so many different sources. The sources are radio, television, podcasts, YouTube videos, newspaper articles, books, magazines, other online content, and resources like websites from particular entities that I've been able to find, and putting it all together and then creating the story. And it's so overwhelming. And one of the ways to explain just how deeply invested I am in this is I was working on one of the stories the other night, and Liz was reading in bed. Now, we have some of the lights in our house connected to Google Home, and she was reading in bed on a Kobo, so she was going to adjust the light down, because you don't really need light, because it's not backlit, but it's got this beautiful built-in light that's easier on your eyes. And and she went to adjust the light in the bedroom, and she accidentally adjusted the light in the den where I was working, where the light suddenly dipped down dramatically, and I was so enthralled in telling the ghost story as I was writing it up, and I'm right in the moment and I'm sharing it, and then the lights went down to dark and then back up again, and I almost screamed. I almost had to go change my pants, but it was so funny because I was like, Liz, was that you? And she's like, yeah, sorry, I hit the wrong button. Because you open the app and you can adjust the lights up and down and change the colors and stuff like that. But that's an example of just how when I'm working on a book, whether it's a novel, whether it's a nonfiction book like this, I need to be in it all the way, and that can be overwhelming and potentially damaging, because it's weird. I've been staying up late and writing at night. I've been getting up hours earlier, like the other morning. I normally get up at 5:30, but the other morning I woke up at 4 and I started thinking about the book, and I'm like, I'm just laying here. I'm just going to get up and do it, and getting not as much sleep. And I can't do that for an extended period of time because that will probably kill me. But all this is to say is that's part of the writing process for me. I know that about myself. I love that. I am absolutely loving this. And when I'm in the moment of that kind of writing, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I start this months ago? But it's the pressure I need. I need that pressure of knowing the deadline's there, and then I can fully invest myself in it. Otherwise, I don't. And certain things about this book didn't click until about a month ago. Anyways, about how I was going to approach it. And then when it hit me, it all came together. And that seems to be the process that works for me. But just know that I am loving this so much, and it is taking up a significant chunk of time in my life. And that's, and again, as much as I love it, as much as I enjoy the experience and just feel so energized and empowered as I'm in the throes and passion of writing this book, reminds me how much I love the writing itself. Is so cool when I can finish this scene or this section of this chapter and go, yeah, that's what I was hoping. I was hoping to have this feeling. That's so valuable to me. And again, that ties in so beautifully with what Andrea has to say. So, after this not so brief personal update, but I hope you did get some value in me digging into that part of the writing process and what it means and why it's so important to me. I hope that's a really good segue into why I found the initial conversation and then re-listening back to this conversation so powerful, so important, and I know it's going to be powerful. Or I suspect, I should say. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that you're going to have some sort of deep reaction to this. And I'm so pleased and so happy that I get to share this conversation with you coming up right after this bumper. Hey, Andrea, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about the hero's journey and the importance of applying that, not
Yes.
just in life, but in books and stuff like that. But before we get into that, how did you first get into the writing world?
Kind of in the back door. So I, without getting too deep too fast, I had a really, really serious buried trauma that I was pretty much running from my entire life. And I didn't know until my 20s what had happened to me. But what that meant was that anything that I kind of set my mind to, the PTSD and the perfectionism and the fear of being discovered and all this, it would end up shutting down whatever I was doing.
Really?
So I had dreamed of being an artist and an illustrator.
Okay.
But eventually, as time went on, it became impossible for me to draw or paint. And when I would look at my hands, they looked like separate concrete hands or, balloons filled with concrete that I could hardly move. And so anything in my life that I'd kind of focused on and said, okay, that's my way through, the PTSD and my subconscious would just, crowd around it and pretty much smother it. And so what happened was my sister, who's a writer, Michelle Torrey, she had written this picture book manuscript. And we were both so new that we didn't realize that you're not supposed to like send in illustrations with this.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but we're like, hey, I could try to illustrate this. So I did, and it was really hard. I had to push through, a lot of blocks. I played soundtrack music to kind of get past the voice in my head and get past the concrete arms and all that. But we put together something that I was happy with. And of course it went nowhere, as most projects like that do. But what happened was I kept bugging my sister, well, write another one, write another one. And one day I was writing to her about a camping trip, and something I'd written was pretty funny. And she wrote back and she said, you know what? You need to be writing your own stories.
Mm.
Learn how to write and do it. And I didn't know the first thing about writing. So I took some classes. I took a course through Children's Institute of Literature, I think it's called. And and so the writing snuck in the back door. It was never on my radar.
Wow.
And so I started to write and I really started to enjoy it. And suddenly it became a way for me to express things that otherwise I wouldn't be able to express. And so that's how I got into it. And then now I can illustrate and write, and my subconscious, I have tamed it through energy medicine, through counseling, through lots of different things. And so now I am moving into a space where I can be fully creative.
Was it the writing? I'm curious because you had said when you tried to do creative works that
Yeah.
this trauma that you didn't know was there, this
Yeah.
childhood trauma kept sneaking up and sabotaging.
Yeah.
Was it the writing that actually helped you evade this sabotage, or was there some other thing that happened that allowed you to go, aha, oh, now I get it. Now I see you.
Oh, so you were wondering how I found out about the trauma?
Yeah, like was
Yeah.
there a particular moment, or was it the writing that helped you discover and bypass and like get through the trauma, or how did that
No,
work?
I had the memory come back to me probably a decade before I started writing.
Okay,
But it's one thing to have the memory, and it's another thing to believe that you had a memory and that you're not just crazy.
right,
So the thing is, with a trauma that's so terrible when you're a little kid, you push it down so deep because you don't want it to be true, because you think that somehow you were wrong, you were evil, you were bad, and you made this thing happen. You made these adults do this thing.
right.
And this was a family friend that did that, and he told me it was my fault. It's pretty standard,
Yeah,
for that kind of person to say that. And I really believed him. And so it was, everything was about pushing it down. It's almost easier to be crazy than to think that you're evil, or worse, that something like this can just happen out of the blue.
right.
And so I had the memory in my 20s. And I mean, I'm in my 60s now, and there are moments where I'm still like, did it happen? Did
Oh,
it really happen? Even though I've gone through all of this healing and I've seen all of these memories that were kind of tucked into my emotional file cabinet, they've all come out and I've had to process them and get through them. And yet there's still a part of me that thinks, wouldn't it be easier if I was just making this up?
wow. Wow. So you've got young adult books and
Yeah,
you do not avoid the darkness. You actually
no,
get into very heavy hitting topics. Now, how do you approach that? I mean, because when you have to deal with that
yeah,
heaviness, which obviously still impacts multiple decades later,
yeah, oh yeah.
is it different to write that as opposed to potentially writing that, talking about those things for an adult audience?
Well, I don't write for adults too much, except for like short essays or things like that. For me, because there's just, there's a lot of love that I have for the teenage girl that I was. When I was around 15 and puberty had hit like a hurricane, and everything that I'd kind of kept under wraps as a child, suddenly now I'm going through puberty, and it's just it hits the fan, and it was horribly hard. I can't even, anybody who's listening to this who has been through this, you know how hard it is sometimes to just take that next step and not do something more drastic, to just stop the pain. And so I have a lot of love for the girl that I was. And so when I wrote my young adult book, The Great and the Small, part of the narrative was through this teenage girl, Ananda's viewpoint, where she has this buried trauma, where the dreams, the nightmares are there, where she has these ways of interacting with people that she's like, well, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why do I feel like I'm crazy? Maybe I am crazy. And so that's a narrative that I really wanted to explore because I've never read a book that, I mean, I've read books about trauma. I've read books where people know, they remember what happened. It's really horrible. It's hard. They get through it. I have never read a book told from the inside by someone who knows. And when this has happened to you, you know when someone has been through it. Like there's no, you can't like imagine what it's like. You feel it on a visceral level. And so when I put that into the story and 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 I realized I loved this girl. I'd had so hard of a time loving myself when I was 15, 16. I was so awkward. I felt ugly. I felt stupid. I'm sure there are people out there that can really relate to this. And so when I wrote this story and I find myself crying for this fictional character, for what she's going through, and I realize, wait a minute, the heart of her story is my heart. What she went through, I went through. And I realized I was crying finally for myself and finding that compassion. But one thing that was really, really important in this story was that it's a story about hope. It's a story about finding the light in the darkness. Honestly, I have been through enough despair through my life. I have zero time for any stories that are just like these dark, nihilistic, look into the abyss. I don't like those kind of stories because it's like, no, if that's all I had done, I wouldn't be here today. I would have ended my life. And instead, when you keep walking, you keep putting one foot forward, you keep following the little trail of breadcrumbs that the universe puts in front of you to help get you through that next moment. There is something so beautiful and transcendent about that. And I wanted to put that into my book.
Right.
And the book is actually also about the rise of dictatorship. So it's a book where I combine two very different parts, but they dovetail in this story.
Wow. I want to dig into this a little bit more if I can, because I can't imagine, I can imagine how beneficial it was to recognize your love for this character because you
Yeah.
recognized what heart she came from and what
Yeah.
experience she came from. But I can only imagine how profoundly painful that must have been to write about it. Or was it a combination of, drudging up painful memories,
Yeah.
but also I see writing as therapy in many
Oh, I
ways.
do too.
So how difficult was that?
Sometimes it was excruciating, and I always had a soundtrack. So if there was a scene and I wanted a certain tone, I would play the soundtrack and I would just immerse myself in it. And sometimes it was really, really painful. And at night, I was hardly verbal. Like my husband would come home and I'd be like, you know,
Yeah.
I could hardly talk,
Right.
but it wasn't like I was creating more pain. What I was doing was releasing the pain that was already inside in a creative way where I could see it with new eyes, where I could also rewrite part of my story, where I could add these moments. And I had lots of moments of kindness, of the light breaking through the darkness in my own life. And so I was able to put those moments in this character's life where you start to realize that, yes, horrible things happen in this world, but you're never, in my opinion, you're never given more than what you are given the capacity to get through. So as much as this horrible thing happened to me, I was also given a lot of gifts to get through it. The gift of creative expression, the gift of discernment, of seeing energy. So now I'm also an energy medicine practitioner because when you're kind of straddling life and death the way you are when you have completely disassociated from your body and something really traumatic happens, you look at the world with different eyes. You stop seeing the superficial and everything becomes about this hero's journey. How do I make my life worthwhile? I was not satisfied for one man when I was 5 to run my life into the ditch and that was the end of the story. I was like, that's not happening. That is not where my story ends, and it shouldn't be where anybody's story ends. And so this book and all of my creative work is a cry from my heart for hope, for continuing to walk forward even when things appear hopeless.
I can imagine because we know that when people read, when they experience art, stories, representation is so important. And I can imagine that there are people who've read the book and finally feel seen and heard. Have
Yeah.
you must have heard from some readers then who've reacted and finally said, "Yes, I understand. That's me too."
Actually, I haven't. Um, I
Really?
I haven't heard, and some people didn't get the book. Some people were like, because
Oh,
the
worried about the dark elements or
well, the dictatorship. So the book is a dystopian fantasy,
right.
and I'll just give you a brief
Yeah,
description.
please, please.
I rewrote it yesterday, so it didn't sound like, so formal. So I'll read this. The Great and the Small is a young adult dystopian novel set in modern day about a rat colony ruled by the Stalin-like dictator, the beloved chairman, and his nephew Finn, a scrawny rat desperate for his uncle's approval and a loyal enforcer in the colony's plague war against the human two legs. But when Finn is saved by Ananda, a teenage girl haunted by a trauma she can't remember, it sets in motion a series of events. As Finn begins to see cracks in the world he once trusted, and Ananda searches for the truth buried in her past, their stories unfold in parallel, exploring how trauma shapes us, how dictatorships rise, and what it takes to find the light in the darkness.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that gives definitely gives readers a clear
Yeah.
understanding. And you just revised that recently, you said.
I did. So the first edition was really focused on the rat colony. I really studied the rise of Stalin's power.
Right.
So what started this whole kind of journey for me was when I was around 11, my family, we lived in Germany. We went to a concentration camp museum in Dachau, Germany. And what I saw there really, really like crystallized this idea of being really, really intentional how you live your life, and that good and evil, every baby is born innocent. And so when you have someone who grows into a hero or a saint like Nelson Mandela, who went through horrible things, and yet he came through it shining and brilliant like a diamond. And then you have someone like Hitler or Stalin, who also went, I don't know if Hitler went through hard things, but I think Stalin wasn't treated well as a child. And, so they go through, but instead of becoming these brilliant people, they are consumed by the need to hurt and to control. And so, and they, if they were just on their own, they'd just be, lunatics.
Right.
Uh, who cares? They're one person, they can't harm anybody, just keep them in a room by themselves. But no, they were surrounded by millions of people who gave them the power to do what they did. And while Hitler had been explored a lot, at least in Western culture, Stalin, I felt, had been given a free pass.
Right.
He was known as Papa Joe in Western journals and newspapers, and I'm like, really, Papa Joe? Like he sent 25 million of his own people to concentration camps just to fill quotas.
Yeah.
Like honestly, so I instead of looking at Hitler, I looked at Stalin, and so I looked at the rise of dictatorship. What does it take? What
Right.
small little um, decisions does someone have to make? Like, oh, well, I guess it's not too bad if I do this. And then they take a little turn off you know, and then it's not too bad if I do that. And
Right.
suddenly, after all of these little compromises that they've made on the way, suddenly they are in this place of committing great evil or are accessories to the crime.
Right.
And so I did that through the eyes of a rat colony, which I thought was fascinating. I
Mhm.
I studied rats. I had a little pet rat that I bought for it was yeah, that's a whole other story. Like the pet store owner, I had no intention of going in and buying a rat. Pet store owner puts this little baby Dumbo rat in my palm,
Mhm.
and this little rat curls up into a ball and falls asleep. So I'm like,
Oh,
all right,
and you're mine.
load up my car with the cage, with all the gear, and so
You're
Frodo,
comfortable with me. I think you're coming
yeah,
home. Yeah.
yeah. So Frodo, my little rat, became my guide in this new world of rats, and they're very cool. So then that was the first edition that came out in 2017. So that was written before any of the current political issues at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And then I had the opportunity to do a second edition. And so I decided that Ananda's story needed more. She needed to have the legs that Finn's story had.
Right.
And so I redid her story. I wove in all of these new elements. And by the end of it, I have a story that is, I would say, not to be corny, but it's my heart song. It's a
Yeah.
book that I love. I loved writing it. I loved every aspect of it. It's kind of nerdy with the whole rat thing, and I don't know if you ever read Watership Down.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my model for this rat society, really digging in and
Yeah.
making it feel real. But yeah, it changed my life writing this book.
I love that you talk about hope. So obviously Finn's in a place where there's power and corruption and there's this choice or
Yeah,
option or almost feels like all of the paths seem to be leading darker and darker.
yeah,
Or is there hope? Is there redemption? And I love that you look for the light, you look for the hope. So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
but the same thing, I guess, in the real world, because I think you've spoken about people being the change.
Yes,
So
yes,
obviously there's some element of that in this book, I
yes,
imagine.
yeah. Um, each one of us, some people think that some people are just born evil and I'm like, no, nobody gets off the hook. We are born innocent with the capacity to do either great good or great evil. And most of us are on the continuum. Most of us are decent people, but we're not like Hitler or we're not Nelson Mandela either. But I think that in these times, these are desperate times. We are facing a world where environmental degradation is accelerating. We're reaching a tipping point. Politically, there's, fascism around the world, human rights violations, and we hear all about this in the news. But what we don't hear is that there is an equally powerful, if not more powerful, force that is driving this change, and it is the unification of humankind. We are meant to be one people. We are meant to live in peace. And each one of us, I believe, yeah, I'm a Baha'i, so this is, my beliefs are informed by my faith. I believe that each one of us is born noble, born with incredible capacities, and that through proper education, which includes spiritual, character development, teaching children that being of service is is part of what it means to be human. And not only is that not a sacrifice, it's part of what makes you happy. It gives you joy. I have never seen so many miserable billionaires in my life. When you see people that are only out for themselves, they are miserable. There is never enough money. There is never enough. And so they, if they had a slogan over their head, it would be never enough. And I think that many of us around the world, regardless of what country we are in, what color our skin is, what language we speak, we want more than that. We are not buying this narrative that people are, what can you do? People are evil.
Yeah.
Um, we believe that we have the capacity and the necessity to unite, and that the search for truth is a human right and responsibility, and that it's within each one of us. That's an empowering message.
It really is. I want to, so for listeners who potentially, obviously, there's a lot of trauma and anxiety and worry
Oh, yeah.
about what's going on in the world today. And somebody who's anxious and worried says, "Yeah, but I'm just one person. What can I do?" What's along those lines? What are the things that I can do?
Well, for one thing, if you go to my website, there's something that I wrote. I think it's like 20 pages or something. It's a PDF called 10 Steps to Inner Peace.
Okay.
And they are steps that I gleaned through my own struggles through the darkness. And they are practical steps. And one thing I would say though, um, on a, there are a couple of things I want to say. On an energy level, so as an energy medicine practitioner, I've gotten really interested in quantum mechanics, how everything literally is one. Everything is connected. So it's kind of like if you, as a person, imagine that your actions are like if you have a crystal clear lake that's very smooth and you drop a pebble in it, the ripples go out until they reach the shore. And shore, no matter how big the thing is, those ripples keep moving out. And kindness and love have the power to ripple out, to join other people's light, and to create change. And there has been scientific research showing that when a group of people have prayed together in an area, or if you don't believe in God, if you don't pray, you can still have sincere thoughts of doing good, of being of service. When a group of people have done that and they looked at the crime rate beforehand, these people got together, they were praying, they were, not doing anything physically out in the neighborhood or community. After they had prayed for a certain amount of time, the crime rate was significantly lower. And so I believe, and I think that this is supported by quantum mechanics, that we each are part of this light. To me, there is no evil is not in itself a thing. It is the absence of love, just as shadow is the absence of light. So we are all here to be part of the light. And when we add our hearts and we try to be sincerely giving and loving, and we decide that that is more important than me selling 1 million books or me being the top of this big company, or me you know making a lot of money at the expense of exploiting workers or exploiting the environment. If I suddenly realize in this moment where we are at a tipping point in the universe, in our planet anyway, it needs us to do more. We need to be more than just about self-interest. And lots of people are waking up to this.
Wow. Now I think you've already explained a little bit about this, but I just want to make sure I'm picking up on it. You talk about energy medicine, and I'm
Mhm.
just curious, is that article you mentioned before, is that a way that people can learn how to how to be that energy, how to be that positive force, how to send those positive ripples out into the world?
You're talking about my PDF, 10
Yeah,
steps.
yeah.
Yeah, it does have like little small examples, like how many times can we look back in our life and we might have been feeling terrible, and someone, maybe not even someone we knew, smiles at us and sees us and maybe says, it's going to be okay. And that moment of kindness lights something in us that carries us through the dark days. And so I disagree completely if someone says, well, I'm just one person. What can I do? That's always the way change has happened. It's always about one person here, there, all around the world deciding, I choose love. That's what I choose. And I may not be president, I may not be the CEO of a big company, but I am a member of my community. I can go to a store and smile at the person at the checkout and just really see them. I can go to a restaurant and really see the server and find something good to say to them. Thank you for your service. I really appreciate it. Or in your family, you can say to your children, wow, I love how gentle you were when you petted, our dog. Or I love how you smiled at that, older woman in church. Thank you so much. And so we draw out, like in children, you catch them doing good. You catch them doing wonderful things, and you draw those out of them and you say, wow, look what you did. You made that person smile. That was wonderful. Good for you. And so we can be that leaven in the bread, no matter where we are, who we are, how poor we are, how rich we are. We can be that. And and I believe we are called to do that. That's why we're here. We're here to help each other. We are a collective.
I love that it's not just about doing those small miracle moments that don't seem to be miracles at all, but that smile can change someone's day.
Yeah,
Not just doing those things, but positively calling out when we see it in others,
yeah,
right? Like saying,
yeah,
wow, that was really awesome that you did this
yeah,
thing that really meant
yeah,
something. I love that because it's a two-way thing.
yeah. It is.
Wow.
And it took me a long time because I was so isolated within my fears of, all my fear. I was so isolated that I really thought it was just me and God and maybe my mom and dad and, but everybody else, I was like, they don't like me and I'm pretty sure that I'm better than them. Because when you really feel that low, you kind of have to balance it with a heavy duty ego
Right.
boost as well, saying, well, I'm better than they are. I'm holier than thou. I'm this and that. And really what it all it was I felt so low that it was like this counterbalance just so I didn't like slip off the edge. But now that I'm like, no, I'm not evil. I was traumatized. That doesn't mean I'm evil. I can get through this. I can move ahead. I can find the strengths and the wisdom, the teaching in this experience. And I'm not God's gift to the world either. So there was this balancing. And I finally realized, like in high school, I felt like such a loser. I thought everybody hates me. Nobody else is going through what I'm going through. You know, I hate my life. And now I look back and I'm like, every single other kid in there was also just going through puberty and they were also like pimply and going, what the heck, who am I, like, how do I do this? And they were also dealing with anxiety. Half of them probably had trauma as well. And I was like, wow, people are beautiful. And I started to see the beauty in people instead of just assuming that they were going to reject me, and so I would reject them first.
Right.
Yeah. So it was a preemptive rejection.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or the only way I can feel good, as you
Yeah.
said about myself, is by putting
Yeah.
myself above other people, and then
Right.
that creates a
Yeah, it creates a real dissonance because it's not true. And at a, on many levels, it's not true. But it was really wonderful to start realizing that every single human being on the planet, no matter who they are, no matter what we've done, at their very, very center is pure energy. And that energy is love. And again, like these scientific studies have shown that, when you send love to a plant, the plant thrives. If you
yeah.
say horrible things to a plant and you send it bad vibes and stuff, the plant withers.
Yeah.
People are the same. So,
I love it. So I want to, as we get close to the end, I want to kind of bring this back to the very beginning of our discussion. You had tried to be creative over time and then got to the point where you managed to make it happen.
yeah.
What do you say? What do you say to people who think, "Oh, it might be too late for me to be a creative person. I've never been able to do it." What sort of lessons would you offer to people who are thinking, "Ah, it's too late to start writing. It's too late to start my art."
I think that I really think it's a maybe a false trail to look at how you are creative just because we are creative. We are. People are creative in different ways. Like Einstein was creative with physics, So uh, I would say really start small. Start listening to yourself. Start saying, well, when I do this thing, does that make me happy? When I do this thing, how do I feel? And if writing makes you happy, then do it. If you have a book idea in you, learn how to write and do it. Because the odds of it becoming a bestseller aren't great. But so what? That isn't why we create. When we create for the market, I'm not sure that's art. It's something else. It still has value. But art and creating is when you are creating from that deep place inside that no one else on the planet can do because it's from you, it's from your heart, your soul. It's your unique expression. And that can take many, as many people on the planet as there are. That's how many ways there are that creativity can be expressed. So I would say, don't look at other people. Don't compare yourself with others. Don't look at the clock and wonder if it's too late for you. It's not. Do what your heart calls you to do.
Beautiful words of wisdom. Greatly appreciated. Can you please let my listeners know where they can find you online?
Well, my website is torreybalsara.com. So did you want me to spell that or?
Yeah, let's spell
Oh,
it out
okay.
so that those who are listening can see it. It'll
Yeah.
be in the show notes, but for the
Yeah.
audio listeners only.
So it'd be TorreyBalsara.com. And I'm also on Instagram under Andrea Torrey Balsara and Blue Sky. I honestly cannot remember if they have an odd address. So
That's
I
right.
think it's Andrea Torrey Balsara, but I'm not sure. And then I'm also on Facebook.
Okay. And there
Yeah.
will be links to all of that, including the PDF you mentioned at the website starkreflections.ca. Andrea, my day is so much better because I got to talk to you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
This was a powerful interview. I really appreciated it. It was really important to me. And I told myself before I turned the microphone on, Mark, just don't go on and on and on, please. Would you just try to keep it a little bit short? But we'll see. We'll see how I do with that. So the first reflection is that decision that love and light are more important, and how valuable that is to choose love. And that kind of leads to those moments of kindness that can light something in us, the value of smiling. I think about this. I think about little things. And I remember this when I was in Vegas a couple of weeks ago as I was walking from one place to another and I was passing hundreds and hundreds of strangers. I tried just to see, instead of having a serious look on my face because I was thinking about something, because I'm always thinking about something on my way somewhere, I thought to just be in the moment, to look at people and to smile. And it was an interesting experiment because strangers smiled back at me. And it was almost like that, when you yawn or think about yawning, you start to yawn. And and I think it's so important. I thought, I'm going to see what I can do to push some positivity out into the world. And it felt good to see that reflected back in many of the people that I passed by, because who knows if the person I just smiled at might have been having a bad day, and maybe just seeing a smile, even from a stranger, might have been a good thing. And I read this not that long ago of somebody had shared why they wear like an inclusive pride flag pin, and it's not the virtue signaling or any of the stuff like that. It's an ally who wants to let people know subtly, just, I see you, I acknowledge you, I respect you. And I thought about that because again, to the average person, it's just a pin that you're wearing, but for somebody for whom that isn't very important, it's critical, because they're being persecuted so often misunderstood, so often pointed fingers at and blamed by haters. That little thing could be that one moment of something good in their lives. You're standing in line at the grocery store, for example, and 15 people walk by, and 15 people see the flag, and for that one person who sees it, they needed that. They needed that acknowledgement because it was a hard day of dealing with a whole bunch of BS in their life. And I thought, it doesn't really take much for me to wear that, and it can have that impact. So, recently I also was wearing a poppy, which is what we do here in Canada for Remembrance Day. And I wear the poppy in honor of soldiers. That's where it originally stemmed from World War One, and the poppies in Flanders Field, and a poem, a Canadian soldier who wrote that poem. And it's how we pay homage and tribute to those who've sacrificed for our freedom. And there are people who acknowledge, like, see the poppy, particularly service people who know what it is. And even if they're not Canadian, some Americans know what this is, and to have them say, thank you for wearing the poppy. And it's like, thank you for your service. Thank you for sacrificing things in your personal life for the betterment of others as well. So again, the way that poppy works in terms of making somebody feel seen or acknowledged and appreciated, it's the same thing with that pride flag. It's the same thing in what Andrea says. When you see someone and appreciate them in whatever role they play, it doesn't have to be a big role that they do. It could be a small thing. Just acknowledging them, even in the smallest way, that can bring light. That can bring goodness. Catching someone doing something positive or something good and acknowledging that is a small thing, but it's so, so powerful. I don't think we do enough of that. There was another thing, it kind of leads me to think about this in my rambling, reflective way, of a meme that I saw. Online we get so obsessed, when getting likes. And it's like, oh, I shared this thing and I put so much effort into it and I had 15 likes. Oh, man, nobody likes me. Or 3 likes or 4 likes, whatever it is. If you actually had 3 or 4 people do that little small thing to acknowledge something cool or fun or good that you did, that would brighten your day significantly. So why do we need hundreds or thousands of likes on social media when those little ones in person can be so powerful? I guess it's a reminder to appreciate those little ones online, because it actually is indicative. Indicative? Maybe I speak good. It's indicative of a person, a real live person who is acknowledging and giving you that positive outlook. So I get 1 like on something I share on social media. That's the equivalent of somebody coming up to me and saying, hey, I like that thing you did. Thanks. That's an important acknowledgement. I'm going to take that to heart in a positive way. And then the last thing, I think, is Andrea saying that, the odds of writing a bestseller aren't great. No, it's true. Stark Reflections, they're most likely your book's not going to sell much. Definitely not going to be a bestseller. Those are almost guaranteed for most people. But that's why I still love to say, and I've said this again, I'll continue to say it, is, in the spirit of what Andrea shared, that when you're creating from that deep place inside, you're creating in a way and from a place that nobody else can. Nobody else can do it from your heart, from your soul, from your unique impression and your unique expression. That's the magic, because you're giving to the world. You're giving this creativity to the universe. That's the magic. And someone may react to that the same way that they react to seeing a smile. The same way that a plant, as Andrea says, that plant, that when you talk lovingly to a plant as opposed to in a bitter fashion, there's scientific proof that shows that it actually helps. So doing what your heart calls you to do, embracing the creativity that drives you, that internal voice that has you want to create things and share them with the world. It's not only enriching your own life because you're getting to do something that you love, that your heart calls you to do, as Andrea says, but it may also be one of those things that you put out into the universe that other people love. You matter. Your books matter. Your creativity, your writing, however you share that, matters so much. And I am so glad that you, dear listener, are committed to that, and you're committed to your creativity and your expression. So thank you so much for investing in yourself and your creativity. And I'm assuming that you're listening to this podcast because that's what you're doing. And I want to acknowledge that. I see, sort of figuratively, I see that that's what you're doing. And I respect that and I admire that. And I'm saying thumbs up. Hey, you're so awesome for that. You're also so awesome for listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for lending me your time and your ears. I do appreciate having you there, because knowing that you're there is one of those things that lifts me up so critically in my world and in my life. So thanks for listening. Until next week, and until next episode, this is, as always, Mark Leslie Lefebvre saying, thank you for being there. And here is wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.